Before the story of a nation begins, we face a question bigger than ancestry or geography. Why did God choose one people? From Abraham to Moses, the Bible records a people set apart to carry God's promises and shape history. This journey begins with a promise. To understand their identity, we trace the covenant through the lives God chose to carry it. In this video, we follow their call, their trials, and the foundation of their identity. By seeing these events, we understand why Israel is called God's chosen people. Each step reveals another layer of the promise. Every great story begins with a family. This one begins with the man whose life redirects history. We begin with the family of Terah, where Abraham's story begins. This genealogy sets the stage for the covenant that will define God's chosen people. Before God speaks, the roots of a nation quietly form.
Now this is the history of the generations of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nahor, and Haran. Haran became the father of Lot. Haran died in the land of his birth, in Ur of the Chaldees, while his father Terah was still alive. Abram and Nahor married wives. The name of Abram's wife was Sarai, and the name of Nahor's wife was Milcah, the daughter of Haran, who was also the father of Iscah. Sarai was barren, she had no child. Terah took Abram his son, Lot the son of Haran, his son's son, and Sarai his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife. They went from Ur of the Chaldees to go into the land of Canaan. They came to Haran and lived there. The days of Terah were 205 years. Terah died in Haran.
These verses may seem like simple family history, but they are the roots of a nation. Here we see Abram, Nahor, and Lot introduced. Terah's family leaves Ur for Canaan, stopping in Haran. God's plan is already unfolding. Sarai's barrenness sets the stage for a miraculous future. A halted journey hints at a promise waiting to unfold. The story shifts from genealogy to calling. God tells Abram to leave his home and step into the unknown, promising to make him a great nation. This is where the covenant becomes personal and the journey of faith begins.
Now Yahweh said to Abram, "Leave your country, your relatives, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great. You will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who treats you with contempt. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you." So Abram went, as Yahweh had told him. Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he departed from Haran. Abram took Sarai his wife, Lot his brother's son, all their possessions, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they went into the land of Canaan. Abram passed through the land to the place of Shechem, to the oak of Moreh. Yahweh appeared to Abram and said, "I will give this land to your offspring." Abram built an altar there to Yahweh. He left from there to go to the mountain east of Bethel and pitched his tent, having Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. There he built an altar to Yahweh and called on Yahweh's name. Abram traveled on toward the south.
God's covenant with Abram is central. He promises blessing, protection, and a future for Abram's descendants. Lot accompanies him, emphasizing the family's role in God's unfolding plan. Abram's journey into Canaan marks the beginning of God's possession of the land, and his building of altars shows a faithful response. These verses establish the pattern of trust and obedience that will define the Israelites. As Abram walks the land, the promise grows with him. After Lot separates from Abram, God expands the vision even further. The covenant stretches beyond what Abram can see, revealing the scale of God's plan.
Yahweh said to Abram, after Lot was separated from him, "Lift up your eyes and look north, south, east, and west, for I will give all the land you see to you and to your offspring forever. I will make your offspring as the dust of the earth, so that if a man can count the dust, then your offspring may also be counted. Arise, walk through the land in its length and width, for I will give it to you." Abram moved his tent, lived by the oaks of Mamre in Hebron, and built an altar to Yahweh.
Dust, stars, land. God uses creation's imagery to describe a future not yet born. God commands Abram to look across the land and promises it to his descendants forever. The dust symbolizes the countless generations to come. Abram's obedience reinforces the foundation of Israel's identity and inheritance. The covenant becomes the blueprint of a nation. God's promise to Abram deepens into a covenant, not just a blessing, but a binding relationship. This moment becomes one of the defining foundations of Israel's identity. Here, God reveals the scope of his plan and the cost of the promise.
After these things, Yahweh's word came to Abram in a vision. Don't be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. Abram said, Lord Yahweh, what will you give me since I go childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. Yahweh said, This man will not be your heir. One who comes from your own body will be your heir. Yahweh brought him outside and said, Look toward the sky and count the stars if you can. He said, So your offspring will be. Abram believed Yahweh, and he credited it to him as righteousness.
Abram's faith becomes the model for generations. This passage shows the heart of the covenant. Trust in God's word, even when the promise seems impossible. Israel's identity begins not with strength, but with belief.
He said to Abram, I am Yahweh who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land. Abram asked, Lord Yahweh, how will I know I will inherit it? God said, Bring me a heifer, a female goat, a ram, a turtle dove, and a young pigeon. Abram brought them, divided them, and laid each half opposite the other, but did not divide the birds.
As Abram falls into a deep sleep, God reveals that his descendants will be strangers in a foreign land, oppressed for generations, but ultimately delivered. The covenant includes both suffering and redemption, a pattern that will shape Israel's future.
When the sun went down and it was dark, a smoking furnace and a flaming torch passed between the pieces. Yahweh made a covenant with Abram, saying, I have given this land to your offspring, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaim, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, and Jebusites.
The covenant is sealed by God alone, symbolized by fire passing between the pieces. This moment shows that the promise does not depend on Abram's perfection, but on God's faithfulness. Israel's story begins with a God who binds himself to his people. God expands the covenant with a physical sign, a mark that sets Abram's descendants apart. This moment transforms Abram's identity and establishes a lasting symbol for Israel.
When Abram was 99 years old, Yahweh appeared to him, saying, I am God Almighty, walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you, and will multiply you exceedingly. Abram fell on his face. God said, Your name will no more be called Abram, but Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and nations will come from you. Kings will arise from you. I will establish my covenant with you and your offspring for an everlasting covenant, to be God to you and your descendants. I will give to you and your offspring all the land of Canaan for an everlasting possession. I will be their God.
Here, God changes Abram's name to Abraham, father of many nations. The covenant becomes generational, extending far beyond Abraham's lifetime. God commands circumcision as the sign of the covenant. Every male in Abraham's household and future generations must bear this mark, symbolizing belonging and obedience. This becomes a defining identity marker for Israel. Though Abraham first fathered Ishmael through Hagar, God declared that his covenant line would continue through Isaac.
God said to Abraham, As for Sarai your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but her name shall be Sarah. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. Yes, I will bless her, and she will be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed, saying in his heart, Will a child be born to him who is 100 years old? Will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth? Abraham said to God, Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." God said, "No, but Sarah your wife will bear you a son. You shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He will become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this set time next year." When he finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham.
Abraham becomes the father of many nations. Circumcision is introduced as a sign of the covenant, a physical reminder of Israel's unique relationship with God. The promise now includes a specific heir, Isaac, establishing the pattern of blessing for Abraham's descendants. Through Sarah and Isaac, the covenant extends into future generations, narrowing the lineage and clarifying the path of the promise. Isaac's birth is the fulfillment of a promise that seemed impossible. His arrival confirms God's faithfulness and anchors the covenant in the next generation.
Yahweh visited Sarah as he had said, and Yahweh did to Sarah as he had spoken. Sarah conceived and bore Abraham a son in his old age, at the set time God had spoken. Abraham called his son Isaac. Abraham circumcised Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God commanded. Abraham was 100 years old when Isaac was born. Sarah said, "God has made me laugh. Everyone who hears will laugh with me." She added, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age."
Isaac's birth is more than a family moment. It is the continuation of a divine plan. Through him, the covenant moves forward. God tests Abraham, commanding him to offer Isaac as a burnt offering. Abraham obeys, trusting God completely. At the last moment, God stops him and provides a ram. Abraham names the place Yahweh will provide, marking God's faithfulness and the depth of Abraham's obedience. Abraham's obedience confirms the covenant. God blesses him abundantly, promising innumerable descendants and influence over nations. This moment shows that faith and trust are central to being God's chosen people, and that the covenant depends on both divine promise and human response. The covenant passes from Abraham to Isaac and then to Jacob, continuing the lineage of God's chosen. Each generation receives the same promise, showing that God's plan is steady, intentional, and unbroken.
There was a famine in the land, in addition to the first famine in the days of Abraham. Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, to Gerar. Yahweh appeared to him and said, "Don't go down into Egypt. Live in the land I will tell you about. Live in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For I will give to you and your offspring all these lands, and I will establish the oath which I swore to Abraham your father. I will multiply your offspring as the stars of the sky, and will give all these lands to your offspring. In your offspring all the nations of the earth will be blessed, because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my requirements, commandments, statutes, and laws."
After Isaac receives the covenant promise, the story turns to his son Jacob, who will encounter God in a defining moment of his own.
Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed there all night because the sun had set. He took one of the stones of the place, put it under his head, and lay down to sleep. He dreamed and saw a stairway set upon the earth, its top reaching to heaven, with angels ascending and descending on it. Behold, Yahweh stood above it and said, "I am Yahweh, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. I will give the land you lie on to you and to your offspring. Your offspring will be as the dust of the earth, and you will spread abroad to the west, east, north, and south. In you and in your offspring, all the families of the earth will be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you again into this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you."
Isaac receives a reaffirmation of the covenant: land, descendants, and blessing. Later, Jacob receives the same promise at Bethel. God's blessing extends in every direction, confirming that his covenant is enduring and unbreakable. These repeated promises show God's consistency. Each generation hears the same words: land, descendants, blessing, presence. This repetition anchors Israel's identity in God's faithfulness, not human strength. In this season of his life, God begins calling Jacob by a new name, Israel, marking him as the one through whom the covenant people will grow. Years earlier, Joseph had been sold into slavery by his jealous brothers, but God raised him to power in Egypt. Now, in a time of famine, Jacob and his entire family journey to Egypt, seeking survival and reunion, setting the stage for Israel's growth. What begins as a family journey becomes the foundation for a nation's future deliverance.
Israel traveled with all that he had and came to Beersheba and offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God spoke to Israel in the visions of the night and said, "Jacob, Jacob." He said, "Here I am." He said, "I am God, the God of your father. Don't be afraid to go down into Egypt, for there I will make of you a great nation. I will go down with you into Egypt. I will also surely bring you up again. Joseph's hand will close your eyes." Jacob rose up from Beersheba, and the sons of Israel carried Jacob their father, their little ones, and their wives in the wagons Pharaoh sent to carry them. They took their livestock and goods they had acquired in Canaan and came into Egypt.
Jacob's entire family travels with him into Egypt, sons, daughters, grandchildren, and all their households. The tribes of Israel are listed by name, showing the fullness of the family line. In total, 70 members of Jacob's household enter Egypt, forming the foundation of the future nation.
Joseph prepared his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father in Goshen. He presented himself, fell on his neck, and wept a long time. Israel said to Joseph, "Now let me die, since I have seen your face, that you are still alive."
Joseph and Jacob's reunion is emotional and powerful. After years of separation, God restores what was lost. This reunion confirms that God's plan has guided every step, even through suffering.
Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's house, "I will go up and speak with Pharaoh and tell him, 'My brothers and my father's house who were in Canaan have come to me. These men are shepherds, for they have been keepers of livestock, and they have brought their flocks, their herds, and all that they have. When Pharaoh summons you and asks, 'What is your occupation?' say, 'Your servants have been keepers of livestock from our youth until now, both we and our fathers. So you may dwell in the land of Goshen, for every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians.'"
Joseph prepares his family to meet Pharaoh, ensuring they will settle in Goshen, a land suited for shepherds and separate from Egyptian culture. This preserves Israel's identity even while living in a foreign land. As Joseph nears the end of his life, he reminds his brothers of God's promise. Though they are settled in Egypt, Joseph affirms that God will bring them back to the promised land.
Joseph said to his brothers, "I am dying, but God will surely visit you and bring you up out of this land, to the land he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob."
Joseph's final words point forward. Though Israel is in Egypt, God will not leave them there. The covenant continues and deliverance is coming. This promise becomes the anchor for the generations that follow. The Israelites suffer under harsh oppression in Egypt, but the covenant does not fade. Their pain becomes the backdrop for a greater unfolding story. Even in the darkest conditions, God's promise quietly endures, waiting for the moment it will break into history again.
In the course of those many days the king of Egypt died, and the children of Israel sighed because of the bondage. They cried, and their cry came up to God because of the bondage. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the children of Israel, and God understood.
Israel's cries rise from the depths of slavery, and God responds. He remembers his covenant, not as a distant memory, but as a living promise. Their suffering becomes the turning point, the moment heaven bends toward earth to act on their behalf. This is the hinge of the story. God sees, God hears, God remembers, and God understands. The silence of centuries breaks, and the stage is set for a deliverer. From the shadows of oppression, the next chapter begins with the birth of Moses. Moses, once rescued from the Nile and raised in Pharaoh's house, fled Egypt after defending an Israelite and lived in Midian as a shepherd. One day, while tending sheep in the quiet wilderness far from Egypt and the pain of his past, God breaks into his life with a sight unlike anything he has ever known. A bush engulfed in flames, burning but never consumed. This moment marks the beginning of Moses' calling and the next chapter of God's covenant plan.
Now Moses was keeping the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the wilderness and came to God's mountain, to Horeb. Yahweh's angel appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the middle of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush burned with fire, and the bush was not consumed. Moses said, "I will go now and see this great sight, why the bush is not burned." When Yahweh saw that he came over to see, God called to him out of the middle of the bush and said, "Moses, Moses." He said, "Here I am." He said, "Don't come close. Take off your sandals, for the place you are standing on is holy ground."
What Moses sees is not just a miracle, it is an invitation. The God who appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob now draws near to him. The fire that does not consume becomes a symbol of God's presence, powerful, holy, and impossible to ignore.
Moreover, he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. God said moreover to Moses, "You shall tell the children of Israel this: Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever, and this is my memorial to all generations. Go and gather the elders of Israel together and tell them, Yahweh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob has appeared to me, saying, I have surely visited you and seen that which is done to you in Egypt. I have said, I will bring you up out of the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey."
Moses stands before the burning bush overwhelmed, yet God's words anchor him in a story far older than himself. The God of his ancestors now speaks directly to him, revealing that the long-awaited moment of deliverance has arrived. Moses is no longer a fugitive. He is the chosen instrument of a covenant God. God identifies himself by the covenant fathers, linking Moses' calling directly to the promises spoken centuries earlier. Israel's liberation is not random mercy. It is covenant fulfillment. Moses becomes the chosen mediator through whom God will honor his oath and lead his people toward the land he swore to give them. Before God sends Moses to confront Pharaoh, he addresses Moses' fear and hesitation. Moses doubts his ability to speak, but God provides exactly what he needs: a spokesman, a partner, and a reminder that the mission rests on God's power, not Moses' skill.
Yahweh's anger burned against Moses, and he said, "What about Aaron, your brother, the Levite? I know that he can speak well. Behold, he is coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he will be glad in his heart. You shall speak to him and put the words in his mouth. I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and will teach you what you shall do. He will be your spokesman to the people. He will be to you a mouth, and you will be to him as God. You shall take this rod in your hand, with which you shall do the signs."
With Moses strengthened and Aaron appointed, God reveals the deeper reason behind Israel's coming deliverance. It is not merely rescue, it is covenant fulfillment. God roots the entire mission in the promises made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
God spoke to Moses and said, "I am Yahweh. I appeared to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob as God Almighty, but by my name, Yahweh, I was not known to them. I have established my covenant with them to give them the land of Canaan, the land of their travels, in which they lived as aliens. Moreover, I have heard the groaning of the children of Israel, whom the Egyptians keep in bondage, and I have remembered my covenant." Therefore, tell the children of Israel, I am Yahweh, and I will bring you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will rid you out of their bondage, and I will redeem you with an outstretched arm and with great judgments. I will take you to myself for a people. I will be your God, and you shall know that I am Yahweh, your God, who brings you out from under the burdens of the Egyptians. I will bring you into the land I swore to give to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I will give it to you for a heritage. I am Yahweh.
Armed with God's promise and authority, Moses and Aaron stand before Pharaoh with a simple command that carries the weight of heaven: "Let my people go." As a sign of that authority, Moses' staff becomes a serpent before the king, yet Pharaoh still refuses, and the confrontation between God and Egypt begins.
Afterward, Moses and Aaron came and said to Pharaoh, "This is what Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness."
Pharaoh's hardened heart sets the stage for the plagues, judgments that expose Egypt's gods as powerless and reveal Yahweh as the true God over all creation.
Yahweh said to Moses, "Pharaoh's heart is stubborn. He refuses to let the people go. Go to Pharaoh in the morning. He is going out to the water. Stand by the riverbank to meet him, taking the rod that was turned to a serpent. Tell him, 'Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, has sent me to you, saying, let my people go, that they may serve me in the wilderness.' Until now you haven't listened. Yahweh says, 'In this you shall know that I am Yahweh. I will strike the waters of the river with the rod in my hand, and they will be turned to blood.'"
Plague after plague strikes Egypt, each one dismantling another pillar of Egyptian religion and power. Yet Pharaoh refuses to yield until the final judgment falls.
At midnight, Yahweh struck all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sat on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of livestock. Pharaoh rose up in the night, he, all his servants, and all the Egyptians. And there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. He called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, "Rise up, get out from among my people, both you and the children of Israel, and go, serve Yahweh as you have said. Take both your flocks and your herds as you have said, and be gone, and bless me also."
Freed at last, Israel leaves Egypt, but Pharaoh pursues them to the sea. What happens next becomes the defining moment of their deliverance.
Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all night, making the sea dry land. The waters were divided. The children of Israel went into the middle of the sea on dry ground, with the waters a wall on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went in after them, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen.
The parting of the Red Sea becomes the final proof of everything God displayed in Egypt: his power over Pharaoh, his judgment on oppression, and his unwavering commitment to redeem his people just as he promised. In the very waters that opened for Israel, God's trap was set, and the Egyptian army was swept away. After their deliverance through the sea, Israel journeys into the wilderness where God leads them to Sinai, the mountain where the God who rescued them now reveals the purpose of their freedom. At Sinai, God calls the Israelites into a new identity, not just rescued people, but a holy nation and a kingdom of priests. This moment marks the formal invitation into covenant partnership, where Israel is set apart to reflect God's character to the world.
Moses went up to God, and Yahweh called to him out of the mountain, saying, "This is what you shall tell the house of Jacob and the children of Israel. You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession from among all peoples, for all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you shall speak to the children of Israel."
God sets apart Israel not only for blessing, but for purpose. They are called to embody righteousness, to live under divine law, and to reflect God's holiness among the nations. Their chosen status is not passive, it is a mission, a calling to represent the covenant God to the world. At Sinai, God speaks directly to his people, giving them the commandments that will shape their identity, define their worship, and establish the foundation of their covenant life.
God spoke all these words, saying, I am Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourselves an idol, nor any image of anything that is in the heavens above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow yourself down to them, nor serve them. For I, Yahweh your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, on the third and on the fourth generation of those who hate me, and showing loving kindness to thousands of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not misuse the name of Yahweh your God, for Yahweh will not hold him guiltless who misuses his name.
These first commands establish Israel's loyalty to God alone, grounding the covenant in worship, reverence, and devotion.
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. You shall labor 6 days and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to Yahweh your God. You shall not do any work in it. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your livestock, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy.
The Sabbath command sets Israel's rhythm of life, reminding them that rest itself is a gift from their Creator.
Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long in the land which Yahweh your God gives you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his male servant, nor his female servant, nor his ox, nor his donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's.
With these 10 words, God establishes the moral foundation of his people, a covenant identity rooted in justice, holiness, and love for neighbor.
They said to Moses, Speak with us yourself, and we will listen. But don't let God speak with us, lest we die. Moses said to the people, Don't be afraid, for God has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, that you won't sin. The people stayed at a distance, and Moses came near to the thick darkness where God was.
The commandments reveal what it means to live as God's people. Through them, Israel receives a moral and spiritual framework that sets them apart, calling them to reflect God's holiness in every part of life. At Sinai, the covenant moves from spoken words to a binding ceremony. Through sacrifice, blood, and God's revealed glory, Israel enters a sacred relationship with the one who delivered them.
He said to Moses, Come up to Yahweh, you, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship from a distance. Moses alone shall come near to Yahweh, the others shall not come near, and the people shall not go up with him. Moses came and told the people all Yahweh's words and ordinances. All the people answered with one voice and said, All the words which Yahweh has spoken we will do. Moses wrote all Yahweh's words, rose early in the morning, and built an altar at the base of the mountain with 12 pillars for the 12 tribes of Israel. He sent young men of Israel who offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of cattle to Yahweh. Moses took half the blood and put it in basins, and half he sprinkled on the altar.
The altar and the blood mark the covenant as a sacred bond, a life-binding agreement between God and his people.
He took the book of the covenant and read it in the hearing of the people. They said, We will do all that Yahweh has said and be obedient. Moses took the blood, sprinkled it on the people, and said, Look, this is the blood of the covenant which Yahweh has made with you concerning all these words.
The people accept the covenant with full commitment, sealing their obedience with the blood that binds them to God.
Then Moses, Aaron, Nadab, Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel went up. They saw the God of Israel. Under his feet was something like a pavement of sapphire stone, clear as the sky itself. He didn't lay his hand on the nobles of Israel. They saw God and ate and drank.
In a moment of unimaginable grace, the leaders of Israel behold God's glory and share a covenant meal in his presence.
Yahweh said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and stay here, and I will give you the stone tablets with the law and commands I have written, that you may teach them." Moses rose with Joshua, his servant, and went up onto God's mountain. He said to the elders, "Wait here for us until we return. Aaron and Hur are with you. Anyone with a dispute may go to them." Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered it. Yahweh's glory settled on Sinai, and the cloud covered it 6 days. On the 7th day, he called to Moses from the cloud. The appearance of Yahweh's glory was like devouring fire on the mountain top in the eyes of the children of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up the mountain. He was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights.
The covenant is sealed with sacrifice, affirmed by the people, and witnessed in God's radiant glory. Moses ascends into the consuming presence of Yahweh to receive the tablets, the written expression of the covenant that will guide Israel's life with God. After receiving the commandments at Sinai, Israel's journey continued through years of wandering, rebellion, mercy, and guidance. God shaped them into a people, teaching them how to live, how to worship, and how to trust Him as they moved through the wilderness under His care. In time, the next generation crossed the Jordan, entered the land God had promised, and began to establish themselves as a nation. From scattered tribes to a people with a home, Israel stepped into the identity God had spoken over them since Abraham, a nation formed, preserved, and led by His hand. So why were the Israelites chosen by God? According to Scripture, they were chosen because they are the descendants of Abraham, the man with whom God made a covenant. God promised Abraham that his descendants would become a great nation, inherit the land of Canaan, and carry His covenant forward into future generations. This was not about race. It was not about nationality. It was not about superiority. It was about a promise. But that raises another question. Why Abraham? Genesis 18:19 gives the answer. God chose Abraham because He knew Abraham would lead his household in righteousness and justice, walking in God's ways. God's choice came first, and Abraham responded with faith and obedience. Through Abraham, God chose Isaac. Through Isaac, He chose Jacob, and through Jacob came the people who would become known as the Israelites. Throughout this story, we've seen that promise repeated again and again when God spoke to Abraham, when He confirmed it through Isaac and Jacob, when He preserved their family in Egypt, when He heard their suffering, when He called Moses to lead them out, and when He gave them His law at Mount Sinai. The Israelites were chosen to carry God's covenant, to live by His law, and to be set apart for His purposes in history. Being chosen did not mean they were perfect. It meant they were entrusted with a promise meant to move through history and ultimately bless all nations. From Abraham to Sinai, one truth stands unbroken. God keeps His promises across generations. That is why, in the biblical story, the Israelites are called God's chosen people, not because of race, but because of covenant, lineage, and promise. This is their story. This is the foundation of their identity. And this is why their history still matters today. If this story changed how you see history, you're going to want the next one. We break down the stories behind history's biggest questions, using original sources, real context, and the details most people never hear. If you made it this far, you're exactly who this channel is for. Subscribe now and be here for the next story.